Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Estonia once again for the first time in what feels like absolutely ages. Now, we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. These guys are probably one of the best known Estonian craft breweries, in fact, and they do lots and lots of different styles actually. We've had many different beers from these guys over the years, but they are very, very solid. I would probably say though that this brewery is best known for its different kinds of Imperial Stouts and their barrel programme. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I've had from these guys a number of times before, one that I know these guys can do very well, and it's also a sub-style that I very much enjoy, in fact. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Tartu in the southeast of Estonia, the home to the oldest university in the country actually, and we're going to have a look then at another beer from Pühaste Pruulikoda. So this particular beer is called Tumeaine. It comes in at 11% ABV, and this one is an Imperial coffee stout. So the coffee used in this one comes from Kokomo, who are a coffee roastery based in Tallinn, and apparently very, very good. But as I've explained to you on the channel many times before, I actually don't drink coffee, but coffee beans are one of my favourite adjuncts to put in Imperial stouts. And we have had a couple of coffee stouts from Puhäste before, but like I said earlier, these guys are very well known when it comes to Imperial Stouts, and their barrel programme, the Silver Series as it's known, is pretty awesome. One of the best barrel programmes in Europe, I would add. But yeah, always cool to try new stuff from Puhäste. This is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden, and I think it's actually my first beer I've reviewed from these guys in about 2 years, which is crazy to think because I do love this brewery. But that just kind of goes to show how many breweries are out there in Europe at the moment and further afield. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. The Tumeaine Dark Matter, as it would be in English, an 11% Imperial Stout with Kokomo coffee from Tallinn. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Puhäste before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go into the homepage, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Estonian playlist along with a number of other things, and we will see about adding to that again at some point in the future. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you once again about Pühaste Pruulikoda. So, Puhäste, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Tartu in the southeastern part of Estonia, and the company was founded back in 2016 by Eero Mander, Lauri Aidaman and Ulla Kaljurand. So Lauri comes from a background in IT, whereas Ulla is a businessman and he specialised in restaurants and bars, whereas Eero is a former DJ but also studied divinity at university. But he was a home brewer for a number of years, starting back in 2011 when he brewed at his summer house in Pusa, and then he released his first commercial beers in 2014 under the name Blessed Virgin, which actually proved to be very successful. But he was approached by Lauri and Ulla. They discovered his beers and thought, you know, we should make a business together, and this is how Puhäste kind of kicked off. So they started off as a gypsy brewery and brewed in various other breweries around Estonia, including Pohjala, who are of course probably the best known of the Estonian craft breweries, but they decided in 2015 that they wanted to set up their own brewery. So they opened this facility in September of 2016, which can be found in Teie Street in the southeast of Tartu, and I think they are, I think if I remember correctly, it's a former industrial laundry actually in which the brewery is located. But they basically have expanded their fermentation capacity due to the high demand of their beers over the years, and these guys can now brew around 3,500 hectolitres of beer per year, or 350,000 litres. They also have the Kelder Bar in the city centre as a tap room, and it's very nice actually. I did go and film an out and about video there when I was in Estonia back in, was that 2020 if I remember correctly, or 2019, but yeah, I did film an out and about video at the Kelder Bar in the city, and I also did an interview with Aeromander from the brewery too, so you can check out these kind of all out and about videos and the meet the brewery sort of things. But it was a really fun one to do that and to visit Pühaste Pruulikoda in Tartu itself. But like I say, these guys over the years have probably become best known for their Imperial Stouts. The Silver Series, like I say, their Barrel Series is one of the best in Europe, I would say. So if you get the chance to try some of those beers, I would certainly do that. But they do some very nice IPAs, West Coast New Englands, and some nice lagers as well actually these days, which they're doing more of from what I understand. But yeah, as of June 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 275 different kinds of beer, and they are fairly easy to find in good beer shops across Europe actually. But this was the first one I'd seen released in Sweden in a little while, hence why I hadn't reviewed anything from them for about 2 years. So yeah, we'll need to make sure that doesn't happen again. But yeah, that is everything I can tell you about Pühaste Pruulikoda for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at this beer. So this is, I believe, the first Imperial Stout I'm reviewing from these guys that was in a can. They only started canning their beers within the last 2 or 3 years, if I remember correctly, and they started off doing it just to the IPAs, I think, because when I met Aero, the beer that we tried together was an IPA in one of the cans, and it was very, very good. But yeah, you can see the artwork on this one is very, very nice. Tumeaine, of course, is the name of this beer, as I mentioned earlier, and that translates into English as dark matter, hence why you've got the kind of black hole or nebula on here. But yeah, you can see plain black top on the top of the can there. If we bring the can up, you can see Puhäste symbol there, which is good, and it tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here as well. So this says a special version of Tumeaine made in collaboration with Kokomo coffee roasters. The coffee used is Papua New Guinea Elimbari. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. I forget how much this beer cost me. I want to say it was maybe about, I think this one might have only been about 60 Swedish kroner or something like that. It really wasn't too expensive. So if it was 60 Swedish kroner, that translates to roughly about €6, £5.50 sterling, somewhere in the region of like $7 American, something like that. So for an 11% imported Imperial coffee stout, I think that's pretty damn good actually. I'm quite happy with that. But you know, I know this brewery's good. I wouldn't care about paying a little bit more to have one of their beers, of course. But yeah, as I said to you earlier, one of my favourite subtitles when it comes to Imperial Stouts is the Imperial Coffee Stouts. And the main reason for that is that coffee beans are such a diverse adjunct. They're probably as diverse as hops are in terms of IPAs and things like this. But with coffee, you can grow it in different parts of the world, of course. So you've got different water profiles, different soil profiles. You know, Indonesian coffee is very different from, say, from Ethiopian coffee, or the Colombian or Brazilian ones that you'll find in South America. It can vary from continent to continent. You've got different varieties of beans in there as well, and apparently one of the big factors with coffee is the massal, the metres above sea level at which it's grown. The higher the altitude at which you grow the coffee bean, apparently the more likely you are to get the sort of floral and aromatic and fruity flavours out of it. So it's a really interesting thing to play with basically, and there's so many different varieties of coffee bean across the world. But yeah, that's it basically. So we'll talk a little bit about the coffee beans in this one during it, but I think we can open this guy up and have a little look at the beer now. So let's do this. I'm very curious about this one, as I said. It has been a good wee while since we've had an Imperial Stout from Puhäste, and I know that there are several versions of this particular Imperial Stout that have been released as part of the silver series, you know, because they'll use the same beer and then just age it in a bunch of different barrels, Calvados and rum barrels and bourbon barrels and all these kind of things. So try some of the different versions of this in the silver series if you get the chance. But you can see the head on this one, when we've poured it out, has disappeared very, very quickly. It poured initially with about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say kind of medium to dark tan head, but like I say, that's faded away just to leave you a little bit of a ring around the edge of the glass there. But you can see nice kind of medium-sized bubbles just chilling there, but that gives you an idea as to what the colour of the head is in this one. But yeah, it looks very, very nice, this beer, I have to say. But yeah, in terms of the appearance, it's kind of what you would expect from an Imperial coffee stout. Pretty much black as night. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect that as well. So yeah, but it's quite hard. I should also point out that it's quite hard to change the colour of an Imperial Stout or black beers, generally speaking, with barrel aging or adjuncts. I've only ever seen it done once, actually, from this brewery, because they did a stout, I believe, that had beets in it. So yeah, that was quite interesting. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass for this one, and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head, but there really isn't very much in the way of carbonation visible in this one. There are a few little bits of sediment just sitting at the bottom of the glass here, so maybe this can was actually sitting in the warehouse a little bit before it went out onto the shelves in Systembolaget. I can't remember exactly when this one was released, actually. I forgot to say that earlier, but this one was a tillfälligt sortiment release through Systembolaget here in Sweden. I think it came out at the start of May or something like that. I've had this beer a couple of weeks, actually. But being an Imperial Stout, you can let it sit for a wee while if you want. But yeah, other than that, I don't think we need to say anything about the appearance of this beer. The only other thing that I would maybe add is that if you shine the light through this one, you do get a little bit of that Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it, which is nice. But yeah, let's take a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see what it's all about. That does smell very, very nice. Yeah. It gives you everything you would want, aroma-wise, from an Imperial coffee stout, actually. It's a lovely, lovely smelling beer, I have to say. Yeah. On the coffee side of things, it smells absolutely lovely, but we'll go back to the coffee beans a little bit later on. But like I say, when it comes to Puhäste, you can pretty much guarantee within this style category you're going to get a very nice example of the beer. So let's just break this beer down in terms of its aroma and describe it a little bit more in depth. But I will say straight away, this beer gives you everything you want. A bit of roastiness, a bit of smoothness, the coffee beans giving you all the depth. You've got like some nice brown sugars, chocolate, all of this kind of stuff. A little bit of fruitiness as well. Lovely smelling beer. So let's take it and look at it a little bit more in depth then. So, the backbone of the beer, you've got a lovely little bit of that kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust in there. This is one of the things you'll always get. So this beer does have a little element of that kind of Russian Imperial Stout type thing. It's not too sweet, and as I've always said, when it comes to Imperial Stouts, for me, I love the Imperial Milk Stouts, I love Sweet Stouts, I love Imperial Coffee Stouts, and I love the old school RIS. The more modern pastry stouts, I'm not the greatest fan of, I have to say that. But yeah, that's one thing I have noticed, that you don't get too many of those in Estonia, actually. So yeah. But yeah, on top of the kind of roasty, toasty bread crust, you start to get a few other things going on with this one. There is a little touch of a kind of bready character in there, like I'm getting a little hint of a sort of slightly sweet, kind of rye bready character. But then above that, you have a sort of chocolate muffin type note, maybe a little bit of a slightly more dense chocolate brownie. yeah, roasty bread crust, a little touch of woodiness in there, of course. Then the little bit of rye bread, a little bit of a kind of chocolate sponge cake or muffin, something like that. Then a more kind of dense chocolate brownie note coming out of this one. There are, of course, little notes of kind of nuttiness to this one as well, which is something that again you would expect from the sub style, or the style generally, we can say as well. But then above these kind of cakey and bready notes, you do have a little bit of I would say, you get more of the kind of chocolate coming out of this one, and the chocolatey side of this beer is actually quite interesting because it has a little bit of an almost kind of creamy character to it in a way, but yeah, so you get a little bit of milky chocolate out of this one, but at the same time you're getting the kind of more higher percentage cocoa, darker chocolate notes coming out of it. So yeah, the way it goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So you do, with the chocolatey side of things, yeah, you've got a bit of that kind of 80-90% cocoa chocolate, but as I say, it's like quite a wet, sweet, almost creamy type chocolate you're getting, but you can smell that the chocolate kind of mellows out, and you do also have notes of like a 50% cocoa chocolate, not far off a milky chocolate in fact. So yeah, the way that this one goes together is really nice in that regard. So above the chocolate, you start to get some of the brown sugars. So for me, this beer doesn't have too much of a kind of leathery note to it, and with Imperial Stouts you have to think about the two main things you can do with these beers would be, you can do a double mash, and that gives you a really big, thick, kind of almost sticky mouth feel. You can take it further than that with a triple mash if you really want to, but then the other thing you can do with them is use a longer wort boil, and in that case you're going to get more of the kind of leathery, brown sugary kind of notes out of this one, which gives the beer a bit more complexity. And I'm tempted to say this one, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a double mash. So yeah, it's kind of interesting in that sense, because you have a little bit of leathery brown sugar in here, but not too much. So I don't think this one's had a particularly long wort boil, I would say that. But yeah, you do get little elements of a kind of treacly molasses type note in this one. There is a little bit of leathery brown sugar, and you've also got a wee bit more of that kind of toasty brown sugary character as well. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is really very nice. Yeah, I do think the way that goes together is really, really nice in this one. But of course, we've not really addressed the elephant in the room with this one yet, which is the coffee beans. So for me, the coffee beans are quite interesting. They come across as really sort of, they've got a good little bit of aromaticity to them. So yeah, they've got quite a little bit of aromaticity to them, but there's like a really oily kind of plummy character at the same time, but it's not too bright and too sharp a plummy note. The coffee beans, as I say, the whole vibe of them is quite deep and quite oily. You've got a little bit of kind of, you've got a kind of smooth roast in there, a little bit of earthiness, nice oily aromatic qualities, and a sort of oily plummy character coming out of this one as well. So yeah, the way that everything kind of pieces together in this beer, I think, is very, very nice, actually. The coffee bean, I think we're going to probably get more complexity out of the coffee bean when we actually taste the thing. But yeah, I think the aroma of this one is really good. But I think that's everything we need to say about the malty, yeasty and kind of adjuncty side of this beer. In terms of the hoppy side of things then, as I always say about Imperial Stouts, they're not the most hop forward of styles, but yeah, you are still getting a little bit of hoppiness out of this one. There's a wee bit of earthiness in there, not too much I would hasten to add. There's a little tiny bit of herbal character, but I'm getting wee remnants of a kind of floral aromatic note and a bit of grassiness there, but they come across as quite wet and oily. One of the things you always have to remember about Imperial Stouts is that you can let these sit for a little bit and the hoppy character will progressively drop out over time. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly when this beer was canned. We can check for a canned on date a little bit later on. But yeah, you still get little elements of hoppy character out of this one. So on the fruity side of the beer, I would say you've got a little touch of kind of the fruits in this one don't really jump out of the glass at you compared to some other Imperial stouts, but I think we will get more when we taste it. So there is a little bit of a kind of there is a little bit of a kind of plummy note out of this one. Yeah, so nice juicy kind of plum. I get a little touch of fig and a little bit of like black currant, but like I say, you have to sugar the beer up to get the fruit out of this one, and you do get a wee bit of the raisiny sharpness and a wee bit of the blackberry sharpness, but yeah, it's kind of a soft plum, figgy, black curranty note that sits underneath. Yeah, see, lovely aroma to this one, and I think it's going to be quite nice when we taste it. So I think we should leave it at that for the aroma. As I always say, it'll take a bit of time to enjoy these aromas before you get stuck into the beer. But yeah, let's taste this one then. So this one is the Tumeaine, an 11% Imperial Coffee Stout as a collaboration with Kokomo Roastery from Tallinn. This one comes to you from Pühaste Pruulikoda in Tartu in the southeast of Estonia. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, tervi6. Oh yeah, that's pretty damn good, I have to say. But as I said earlier, I would not expect anything less from Puhäste. Yeah, this is lovely. First impression, lovely big silky thing, really quite a sweet Imperial coffee stout. Like lovely stuff. It's kind of cool. One of the other things I have to say is a lot of the stouts I've had from Puhäste over the years have been part of the Silver series, so it's kind of a bit of a novelty to try one of the originals, if this makes sense. So for me, trying this one and seeing how good the OG stuff is pretty satisfying in itself. It just goes to show you how good they are, these big Imperial stout beers. Yeah, it's as I say, a massive thumbs up from me. But yeah, let's break this beer down then, describe it in depth as we always do. We'll start on the middle third of the palate as usual. So the backbone of the beer. So, as I was saying earlier, you've got a little bit of that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crusty character. That forms the backbone of the beer, but it's very light in a sense. It's actually just a kind of like smattering of that. But as you go further forward on that middle third of your palate, there's a teeny little touch of woodiness in there, and the woodiness almost has a little bit like a kind of brown sugary note there. But then above that, you get this kind of highly caramelised sort of rye bready type thing out of this one. I'm curious as to whether it's got rye or anything in it, but it just says on the side here it's got it in Swedish, just corn malt. It's only barley malt, so there's nothing there's nothing about wheat or rye or anything like that, so that's kind of interesting. This is an all barley malt beer, this one. So as I say, above that kind of almost it's got slightly like sweet, oily, caramelised sort of rye bready character to it. Above that, you get a mix of like there's like other bready character going on, but it is a little bit like a kind of chocolate muffin layer, but it has the kind of density, pardon me, of like a chocolate brownie. The malty character in this beer really is very, very nice. So yeah, the malty notes in this beer really are very nice, as I see, with that caramelised rye bread, a little bit of a kind of, yeah, I think the chocolate brownie layer is actually below the kind of more chocolate muffiny note And then, yeah, you get the sort of chocolate muffiny and wholemeal brown bready character sitting above that. It's really interesting. And of course, the further into the aftertaste you go, you do get a little bit of an almost nutty character out of this one. That's really interesting. And you do have this sort of kind of residual flavour in this one. It reminds me, the flavour reminds me of the aroma of rolling tobacco. As I've said to you in many reviews before, when I did toxicology labs, we quite often use tobacco because there's so much shit in it. It's very, very good to use for practicing your techniques and things like this. And just some of there's a little bit of this almost kind of chewy, tobacco-y type flavour in here, and it really just reminds me of the aroma. I love the aroma of the rolling tobacco, actually. So yeah, you've got a wee bit of that flavour going on, as I say, a bit of a nuttiness, but yeah, rye bread, sort of chocolate brownie, chocolate muffin, and then a kind of wholemeal brown bready character sitting on top. But yeah, above that, you get the chocolatey layer to this beer. The chocolate, it's interesting, the chocolate's kind of on a spectrum, if you like. At the back of that middle third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a roasty, toasty note to it. It's got a little bit of a charred character, and as you move further forward, you do have, you get a bit more of like an 80-90% cocoa chocolate, then it gradually just mellows out as you move toward the front, of that middle third of your palate. It mellows out to be like a sort of 60% cocoa chocolate. So yeah, nice dark chocolate there, charred at the back, and then it just really smoothens out and becomes more silky and oily toward the front of that middle third of your palate. So yeah, I like that about this one. So yeah, the above the kind of chocolatey layer, then you do get a little bit of brown sugar out of this one. There is a very slight, it's kind of like a circle in the middle of your palate, so there is like a very slight leathery layer underneath that. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of leathery layer underneath. Above all of that, you have, as I say, you have you've got a little bit of a very slight, so you've got the leathery layer, you've got a little bit of toastiness in there, and then there's a sort of sweet caramel layer, and in the dead centre of your palate, you have that more kind of treacly molasses type thing. So the brown sugary character in this beer is very, very layered, but it doesn't feel overly present or pungent, if that makes sense. The brown sugars are there, but they take a little bit of a back seat compared to the chocolate and the kind of cakey elements to the beer, in my opinion. So yeah, that's that. But yeah, I think that's the middle third of the palate covered, so we can look at the back third of your palate and the coffee side of things. So for me, yeah, the coffee, played this beer, the coffee beans sit in that kind of border region between middle and back third of your palate, so you can feel the sort of rye bready base and the kind of chocolate spongy cake above that, and then you get the coffee beans sitting above that. So like, the coffee beans are actually kind of similar to what I was predicting they would be from the aroma. Like, it's a very oily coffee character that comes out of this beer. So for me, there is a little bit of that smooth roast in there, there's a little bit of earthiness, as we said, but lovely big oily characters. Like, it's quite an aromatic coffee, but at the same time it's got a lot of cherry and kind of plum to it, like a very oily cherry plum type character. And that, of course, lingers into the aftertaste too, and it gives the whole beer a little bit more depth. But yeah, like I said, it gets a thumbs up from me. On to the back third of your palate then. For me, the base of that back third of your palate, there's a lovely sort of roasty toasty. You still got that roasty toasty bread crust, of course, but it feels even drier. Above that, you've got the kind of rye bready layer. And as I've often said, more bitter and dry flavours come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours come out further forward. But on the back third of the palate, you often get similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, but they just come out in different intensities. So yeah, you've got the roasty toasty well-fired bread crust in there, which is a bit drier. You've got the kind of more caramelised rye bready layer sitting above that, which does again feel a little bit lighter, a little bit taller and more airy. But then above that, you have a more, as I say, you get the kind of sort of chocolate brownie layer, but it still feels quite dense, but then above that you get the kind of chocolate muffiny type note, and then the kind of wholemeal brown bread, so you can feel all these layers. The back third of your palate in this beer is actually quite complex, but then creeping over the top of that, you've got some of the coffee bean dryness there, and also a little bit of the kind of chocolatey character coming out of it too. But yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really quite nice. The back third of your palate on this one is good, but above everything else, you've got a little bit of yeasty character in there too. So yeah, for me, the yeasty character in this beer is quite subtle. Like, it's a really dense and very sweet, kind of like brandy soaked rye bread or something like that. That's what the yeasty character feels like, and it's just wrapped in this sort of honeycomb toasty caramel note there. I always get honeycomb in the back third of the palate for some reason. But yeah, definitely you can feel the back third of your palate. The flavour is absolutely taller, and as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that regard, I think, is very, very nice. Yeah, so on the hoppy side of things then, the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there, of course. And the earthiness kind of gives you a good little bit of bitterness into the aftertaste, and it builds a good bridge with the coffee and the aromaticity there. So there's a nice kind of contrast going on. But yeah, so you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, you get a wee tiny bit of herbal character, but then as you push toward the front corners of your palate, you get more and more kind of oily floral aromaticity coming out of this beer. So yeah, that's quite interesting. So yeah, nice oily floral aromaticity in there, and then yeah, round the front curve of the palate you get a little bit of grassiness in there, but again, it's quite oily. This whole beer, the coffee bean, the hoppy character, it really is quite an oily beer, this one, and it gets more like that the more that you drink of it. So yeah, that's quite interesting. On the front third of your palate then, let's look at the fruity side of things. The border region between that front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of bready build up in this one, but you can feel it's kind of the rye bread in the base, and then you get more of the chocolate brownie density there in the border region. But the base of that front third of your palate, a little bit of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust again, the rye bread, and then the chocolate brownie, and above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at the fruity side of things then. Yeah. So, fruity side of the beer, for me, there's it's quite like, it's a lot of oily plum in this one. It does have a little touch of raisiny sharpness when you first take it in. We're talking about the back of that front third of your palate, by the way. So there is a little bit of raisiny sharpness in there. Lovely big oily juicy plum sitting underneath that, and then as you move further forward, it gives you a little bit more of the kind of oily figgy character. The fruity notes in this one are quite common. They're kind of what you would expect of this style, with the with a lot of the chocolatey character and the coffee and so on. So yeah, a bit of raisiny sharpness, bit of oily plum, and as you move further forward, a more oily figgy character, and then into the front half of that front third of your palate, you have more of a you have a little bit more of a kind of black currant underneath, but then you get the oily black berry kind of sitting on top of that. Yeah, but nice, as I say, big oily fruity notes out of this one. I really like this. This is, again, as I say, for me, the novelty with trying this one is that we're trying one of the kind of OG Imperial stouts from Puhäste, and I honestly can't remember what we've had from these guys over the years, because we've had quite a few beers from them, but at this stage, yeah, for me at least, it's a bit of a novelty to try one of their original non-barrel aged ones, because we have had quite a few members of the Silver series in there. But yeah, again, beautiful beer from Puhäste, but I would expect no less. Lovely, big, oily, smooth and silky Imperial Stout. I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour of this one. We can round off with the mouthfeel on that note. So as I've said, lovely, big, oily, smooth, silky Imperial Stout. Definitely full-bodied. Kind of in the mid-range of full-bodied. It's not the thickest of Imperial Stouts, I think that's fair to say, but it's really nice in that particular regard. As we said earlier, very, very smooth carbonation, which helps give you the silkiness. In terms of IBUs, it's a bit hard to place this one. I think it's at least 70, because you've got roastiness from the bread crust, you have got a bit of hoppiness there, and a bit of bitterness, pardon me, from the coffee and stuff, and a bit of dryness, which could be conflated with bitterness and things. But the malt base, as we said, it's got a lovely kind of oily, caramelised type vibe to it. Big silky notes in there, lots of sweetness. Yeah, the malt base in this one has a lot of diversity, the yeasty character as well. Lovely big oily red fruity notes out of this one, the plums, the blackberries and stuff like that. And yeah, overall it's just a beautiful beer, this one. And the coffee complements it really, really well, the Kokomo coffee. So yeah, I think that's everything that I can really say about this one, to be honest with you. So I think we should leave it at that. So this one is the Tumeaine, an 11% Imperial Stout using Papua New Guinean coffee from Kokomo Roastery in Tallinn. Beautiful beer, this one, and as I've said a few times, really cool to try one of the original non-barrel aged, non-silver series Imperial Stouts from Puhäste. It's cool to go back to the roots and see kind of where it began. But yeah, really cool to try this one. And it's cool to return to Puhäste after what's been about 2 years now. Too long, I have to say. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Pühaste Pruulikoda as well. And as I say, we'll return to these guys at some point soon and to do some more Estonian beers generally. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Puhäste's social media, and I will see you guys again very, very shortly. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you guys on the next review.